The maintenance bay of Station Helios 7 smelled like ozone and machine oil, a scent Maya Chen had grown to prefer over the sterile recycled air of the main concourse. Her repair shop occupied a prime corner spot where the industrial sector met the commercial district, and she liked it that way. Close enough to business to be convenient, far enough from tourist traffic to avoid the chaos. Maya's fingers danced across the diagnostic panel of a malfunctioning hover cart, her movements precise despite the arthritis that had ended her military career. 20 years of military intelligence work had left her with more than just stiff joints. It had given her an eye for detail that made her one of the station's most sought-after mechanics. Third power coupling burnt out this month, she muttered, more to herself than to her shop's eye assistant. Someone's been running military-grade shield generators through civilian power grids again. The hovering diagnostic drone chirped an acknowledgement, but Maya was already focused on something else. Through her shop's transparent front wall, she watched a Vindari merchant pass by for the fourth time in an hour. The insectoid alien's antennae were twitching in what Maya recognized as a sign of anxiety, though few humans had bothered to study Vindari body language that closely. Interesting, she murmured, making a mental note of the time and the merchant's path. Old habits died hard, and pattern recognition had saved her life more times than she could count. The shop's door chimed, admitting a towering galax. The crystalline being's faceted surface caught the light, throwing rainbow patterns across Maya's workspace. Technician Chen, your reputation precedes you. It harmonized in perfect standard. I require assistance with a delicate matter. Maya straightened, suppressing a grimace as her back protested. Welcome to Chen's repairs. What seems to be the problem? Her tone was professional, but her eyes caught the slight discoloration along the galaxy's lower crystal matrices, stress patterns she'd learned to recognize during the Orion conflict. A simple power converter for my ship's life support systems, the Galax said, producing a component that made Maya's trained instincts buzz like angry hornets. The converter was standard enough, but the wear patterns were wrong for life support. They matched exactly what she'd expect from weapons-grade shield modulators. Of course, Maya smiled, accepting the component. Basic diagnostic is free. Should take about an hour. She turned to her workbench, using the motion to mask a subtle tap on her wrist computer, activating passive scanners she definitely wasn't supposed to have as a civilian. The Galax's crystalline form hummed in what might have been appreciation. Your efficiency is noted. I shall return. It glided out, leaving behind trace readings of weapons-grade thorium that Maya's illegal scanners quietly logged. She waited until the door had closed before speaking. Station security. Authorization Chen 7 Delta 9. Flag suspicious pattern report. Third weapons-capable component this week, matching previous profile. Possible connection to increased Vindari activity in Sector 4. The station's AI acknowledged with a single green flash of her workbench lights. Maya returned to her diagnostic work, but her mind was already assembling pieces of a puzzle. The station's anniversary celebration was coming up in 2 weeks, the biggest gathering of species in this sector of space. Perfect timing for someone with bad intentions. As she worked, more customers came and went. A nervous Tyrellian with engine problems that didn't match his ship's registry. A human colonial with perfectly legitimate repair needs who nevertheless set off Maya's finely tuned suspicion. A McLaurin whose cybernetic components showed signs of recent military-grade upgrades. By closing time, Maya had logged 12 suspicious patterns, all individually innocent, all collectively worrying. She locked up her shop with practiced efficiency, nodding to the regular evening patrol of station security. They knew her as the grumpy ex-military mechanic who filed too many suspicious activity reports. They had no idea she'd once coordinated counter-terrorism operations across 3 sectors of space. In her small apartment above the shop, Maya pulled up the station's security feeds, another system she definitely wasn't supposed to have access to. As she watched the day's footage, she noted the intersecting paths of her suspicious customers, the subtle handoffs, the too casual meetings. Showing your cards too early, she muttered, marking timestamps and locations. Amateur hour compared to the Centauri cell back in 47. But that didn't make them less dangerous. Sometimes the amateurs were worse, more prone to mistakes, more likely to cause collateral damage. Maya's wrist computer chimed softly. Another Vindari merchant passing her shop, well after closing. Same nervous antennae twitch, same slightly off rhythm gait, definitely coordinating with someone. She sighed, feeling every one of her 57 years. She'd come to Station Helios 7 looking for a quiet retirement, a place to fix machines and forget about the darker corners of the galaxy. Instead, she'd found herself noticing things she couldn't ignore, patterns that spelled trouble. Getting too old for this, she grumbled, but her fingers were already composing a detailed surveillance plan for the next day. Because that's what humans did. They noticed things, they worried. They planned for the worst. The aliens called it paranoia. Maya called it survival instinct. And right now, those instincts were screaming that something big was coming to her quiet little corner of space. She just had to prove it before it was too late. The next 3 days brought a steady stream of customers through Chen's repairs, each one adding another piece to a puzzle Maya was beginning to wish she'd never noticed. She kept her hands busy with legitimate repairs while her augmented eye, another souvenir from her military days, recorded everything that seemed off. The Galax hadn't returned for its power converter. No surprise there. Maya had gotten quite familiar with the device's internal workings, finding modifications that confirmed her suspicions. It was designed to handle massive energy spikes, the kind you'd need for weapons far beyond civilian grade. Testing resistance on Power Coupling 3, she announced clearly for the benefit of her shop's official monitoring systems, while her actual attention was focused on the McLaurin outside. It was the third one this week, and like the others, its movements suggested recent military upgrades, the kind of smooth, precise gestures that came from black market combat subroutines. Her wrist computer vibrated. Another message from station security dismissing her latest report. Insufficient evidence for escalation, it read. Maya snorted. They weren't wrong. She had nothing concrete, just 2 decades of experience screaming that something was very, very wrong. The shop's door chimed again. This time, it was a human colonial, young, wearing the kind of expensive clothes that suggested new money. Heard you're the best with nav systems, he said, setting a guidance unit on her counter. His accent was pure inner colonies, but his calluses told a different story. Depends what's wrong with it, Maya replied, noting how his eyes kept darting to her shop's corners, checking sight lines and exits. Military training, probably special operations. She'd seen it enough times to recognize it instantly. Just needs calibration, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Been acting up near the station's null gravity zones. Maya picked up the unit, her augmented eye instantly detecting the military-grade quantum encryption module hidden beneath its civilian casing. Should be simple enough. Come back in 2 hours. The moment he left, she began a deep scan of the device. The encryption was top tier, but she hadn't spent 20 years in military intelligence without learning a few tricks. As she worked, she kept one eye on her security feeds. The young colonial met with one of the Vindari merchants in a supposedly broken cargo lift, the kind of place station sensors had trouble monitoring. They exchanged something small enough to hide in a closed fist. The Vindari's antennae twitched in that now familiar pattern of anxiety. Maya's fingers flew across her diagnostic panel, siphoning data from the nav unit while appearing to perform standard maintenance. The encryption began to crack, revealing fragments of coordinates. What she saw made her blood run cold. The coordinates formed a pattern around the station's main reactor core. Each set marked a structural weakness, the kind you'd only know about if you had access to classified station schematics. The kind of points you'd target if you wanted to cause catastrophic damage. She was so focused on the data that she almost missed the shadow passing over her shop's entrance. Almost. Years of training kicked in, and she casually reached under her workbench, fingers finding the comfort of the illegal pulse pistol hidden there. "We're closed," she called out without looking up. The shadow hesitated, then moved on. Maya released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That evening, after triple-checking her shop's security systems, Maya sat in her apartment with a glass of Martian whiskey, studying the data she'd gathered. The nav unit's coordinates, the modified power converters, the military-grade components disguised as civilian repairs, the pattern of movements through the station's less monitored sectors. It all pointed to something big planned for the anniversary celebration. 10,000 beings from across the galaxy would be packed into the station's central hub, including diplomats from 17 species. A perfect target. Her wrist computer chimed with an alert. Another suspicious meeting in progress, this time the maintenance tunnels beneath the commercial sector. She pulled up the feed from her illegal surveillance drones. The young colonial was there, talking to the Galax while a McLaurin stood guard. Maya enhanced the audio, her augmented eye processing the subtle vibrations in the air to reconstruct their conversation. What she heard confirmed her worst fears. Phrases like final preparations and maximum impact weren't exactly subtle. She began composing another report for station security, then stopped. They hadn't listened to her previous warnings, and she was running out of time. The anniversary celebration was just 10 days away. "Getting too old for this," she muttered again, but she was already pulling up station schematics, marking entry points and escape routes. Because that's what humans did. When no one else would listen, when the evidence wasn't concrete enough, they acted anyway. Maya Chen had come to Station Helios 7 looking for a quiet retirement. Instead, she'd found herself in the familiar position of being the only one paranoid enough to see the danger coming, the only one willing to do something about it. She finished her whiskey and began to plan. She'd need more than just suspicions to stop what was coming. She'd need proof, the kind that would make even the most skeptical station security officer take notice. And she'd need it soon, before Station Helios 7's anniversary celebration became known for something far more sinister than diplomatic unity. Maya spent the next week carefully constructing her web. Every repair ticket, every suspicious meeting, every encrypted transmission, all of it fed into a complex network of evidence that only someone with her particular background could have assembled. But she knew it still wasn't enough. The morning of the third day before the celebration, she arrived at her shop earlier than usual. The station's artificial dawn was just beginning to illuminate the commercial sector when she detected an unauthorized access attempt on her security systems. "Amateur hour," she muttered, letting the intrusion proceed while her countermeasures quietly traced it back to its source. The signal originated from a supposedly empty storage unit in the cargo sector, exactly where she'd expected. Her shop's door chimed. The young colonial was back, this time with what appeared to be a simple atmospheric regulator. His smile was friendly, but the micro-expressions Maya's augmented eye detected told a different story. Elevated stress levels, dilated pupils, increased perspiration. "Just needs a quick calibration," he said, setting the device on her counter. Maya picked it up, instantly noting its unusual weight. Of course. Should only take an hour. Her scanners were already analyzing its contents. Traces of specialized nano-explosives, the kind that could reconfigure themselves to match any security signature. She waited until he left before initiating a deeper scan. The device was a masterpiece of illegal engineering, a bomb that could walk right through standard security checks. But its presence confirmed something else. They were getting desperate. Her wrist computer vibrated with an alert from one of her surveillance drones. The McLaurin and 3 Vindari were meeting in a maintenance shaft, their conversation encrypted but their body language clear enough. Something had spooked them. Maya smiled grimly. She'd spent the past week seeding small inconsistencies in their plans. A delayed shipment here, a corrupted data transmission there. Nothing obvious enough to detect, but enough to make them nervous. Nervous people made mistakes. The shop's automated systems continued their diagnostic routines, while Maya accessed the station's maintenance network through one of her many back doors. The anniversary celebration's security preparations were well underway, but she could see the gaps, blind spots the conspirators would try to exploit. A shadow passed her shop's entrance, too quickly for normal station traffic. Maya's hand moved to her pulse pistol, but she kept working as if she hadn't noticed. 3 more shadows followed, their movements coordinated with military precision. Her wrist computer flashed a warning. The storage unit she'd traced the cyber attack to was being cleared out. They were accelerating their timeline. Station security, authorization Chen 7 Delta 9, she subvocalized. Multiple suspicious movements in Sector 4. Possible. She stopped as her connection to station communications suddenly cut off. The shop's lights flickered, then stabilized. Maya's diagnostic panel showed a localized power fluctuation, the kind that preceded a targeted EMP burst. They were making their move. She had seconds to decide. Her evidence was solid but incomplete. Station security would need at least an hour to verify her claims and mobilize a response team. The conspirators would have completed their objective by then. The young colonial appeared at her shop's entrance again, this time with 2 McLaurens. Their cybernetic components hummed with combat readiness. "Just checking on that calibration," he said, his hand resting too casually near his concealed weapon. Maya's fingers danced across her diagnostic panel, appearing to pull up work orders while actually activating her shop's hidden defenses. "Almost finished. Would you like to inspect it?" He stepped inside, followed by his companions. Maya's augmented eye tracked their movements, calculating angles and distances. The colonial's smile widened slightly, the expression of someone who thought they had the upper hand. "You know," Maya said conversationally, "the funny thing about being called paranoid is that sometimes you're actually right." She saw the moment he realized his mistake, the slight widening of his eyes as he registered the faint shimmer of her shop's internal shield grid powering up. But by then it was too late. Maya Chen had come to Station Helios 7 looking for a quiet retirement. Instead, she found herself doing what humans did best, surviving because they planned for the worst, acted when others hesitated, and never, ever assumed they were being too cautious. The colonial's hand moved toward his weapon. Maya's was already on hers. Time to show them why humans had earned their reputation as the galaxy's most paranoid species. The first shot came from the colonial's concealed weapon. A rookie mistake. Maya was already moving, her aging body responding with practiced efficiency as she triggered her shop's internal defense grid. The shield harmonics she'd spent months calibrating snapped into place, containing the plasma burst that would have vaporized half her equipment. Hostile action detected in Sector 4B. Her shop's AI announced calmly to station security, using protocols that bypassed the communications blackout. Multiple armed combatants. The McLaurin's combat routines activated, their cybernetic enhancements humming as they moved with inhuman speed. But Maya had spent 20 years studying how machines think, and machines were predictable. Her first countershot caught the leftmost McLaurin in its primary processing unit, sending it crashing into its companion. "You really should have checked why I had so many military-grade power couplings," she said, rolling behind her reinforced workbench as the colonial opened fire again. "Maintaining this shield grid takes a lot of juice." The colonial's response was a burst of automatic fire that sparked harmlessly against her defenses. Maya used the distraction to activate her shop's secondary systems. Throughout the commercial sector, hidden sensors began broadcasting their data to station security. 2 decades of surveillance, all pointing to one conclusion: an imminent attack on the station's reactor core. "It's over," the colonial snarled, his inner colony's accent dropping entirely. "The charges are already in place. You can't stop what's coming." Maya smiled grimly. "You know what humans are really good at." She triggered a specific frequency through her shield grid. The remaining McLaurin cybernetics sparked and went dark. "We're good at assuming everything will go wrong." The colonial's eyes widened as realization hit. Maya hadn't just been gathering evidence. She'd been preparing a battlefield. Every repair job, every power coupling, every diagnostic scan had been building to this moment. The navigation unit you brought in last week. She continued, steadily moving to flank him. It didn't just give me your coordinates. It let me access your entire network. Those charges you placed, their detonation signatures were rewritten hours ago. An explosion rocked the station, distant but powerful. The colonial smiled triumphantly, but Maya's expression didn't change. That would be your backup charges activating in their contained chambers, she said. Did you really think I'd let you plant explosives without tracking every single one? Station security alerts began blaring throughout the sector. Not the general alarm she'd expected, but targeted responses, moving with precision to specific locations. They'd finally pieced together her evidence. The colonial's weapon swung toward her with lethal intent, but Maya had been ready for this moment since she'd first noticed the Vindari's suspicious behavior weeks ago. Her pulse pistol fired once, the shot threading through a gap in her shield grid that existed for exactly 1 microsecond. As the colonial crumpled, his finger tightened on his trigger. The shot went wide, hitting her diagnostic panel. Sparks flew as her carefully maintained systems began to overload. Maya dove for the manual override, her fingers flying across the emergency controls. The shield grid was destabilizing, its power couplings burning out one by one. She had seconds to prevent a cascade failure that would take out half the commercial sector. Getting definitely too old for this, she growled, rerouting power through her illegal military-grade converters. The shield grid stabilized, containing the energy buildup until it could be safely dispersed. Station security forces burst through her door, weapons ready, led by a very surprised-looking chief of security. Chen. The chief stared at the scene before him. 2 disabled McLaurens, an unconscious colonial, and enough weaponry to start a small war. What in the void is going on? Maya straightened up, wincing at the protest from her back. Well, Chief, remember all those suspicious activity reports you've been ignoring? She gestured at her display screens, still showing the network of evidence she'd compiled. Turns out humans aren't paranoid enough. The chief's communicator crackled with updates. More arrests across the station, hidden weapons caches being discovered, bombs being safely contained. Maya listened with satisfaction. She planned for every contingency, prepared for every possibility, and in the end, it had paid off. Because that's what humans did. They survived by never assuming they were safe, by planning for the worst while hoping for the best, by being just paranoid enough. The chief was still talking, something about debriefings and official statements, but Maya's attention was already elsewhere. Through her shop's transparent wall, she saw a Vindari hurrying past, its antennae twitching in that particular way. She sighed. Some habits died hard. Chief, she interrupted, you might want to send a team to Cargo Bay 7. And this time, try to keep up. The aftermath of what station residents now called the Helios incident rippled through the community like waves in a gravity well. Maya watched it unfold from her newly rebuilt shop, where she still fixed machines and definitely didn't run an illegal surveillance network anymore. Well, mostly didn't. I still don't understand, said Zix, a Vindari merchant who had become a regular customer since the incident. His antennae twitched, not with anxiety this time, but with genuine curiosity. How did you know? There were no obvious signs. Maya adjusted the power coupling she was working on, her augmented eye catching the genuine interest in Zix's body language. There are always signs, she said. Humans just expect them. The station's anniversary celebration had been delayed by 2 weeks, but it had happened. Maya had attended at the chief of security's insistence, enduring countless officials wanting to know how she'd uncovered the plot. She'd given them the simplified version, leaving out the parts about illegal surveillance equipment and military-grade modifications. But that's what puzzles us, Zix continued, his crystalline eyes reflecting the shop's lights. You humans always expect danger. You plan for disasters that might never happen. You see threats in the most peaceful situations. How do you live like that? Maya set down her tools, considering how to explain something that came as naturally to humans as breathing. Let me ask you something, Zix. On your homeworld, what's the weather like? Consistent, he replied, antennae waving gently. Our atmospheric controllers ensure optimal conditions. Earth isn't like that, Maya said. Never has been. One day it's calm. The next, there's a storm that can level cities. Humans learned early that survival meant always being ready for the weather to turn. We carried that lesson to the stars. The shop's door chimed as a McLaurin entered, one of the new security officers assigned to the station after the incident. Maya noted with approval the improved encryption on its cybernetic systems. The chief asked me to deliver this, the McLaurin said, placing a data crystal on her counter. Your new security clearance. Official this time. Maya picked up the crystal, hiding her amusement. They'd finally decided it was easier to authorize her activities than try to stop them. Tell the chief I appreciate it. After the McLaurin left, Zix's antennae twitched again. They're implementing many of your security protocols across the station. Triple redundant systems, random pattern analysis, constant threat assessment. It seems excessive. To you, maybe, Maya said, returning to her work. But tell me, how many attempted attacks have there been since the new protocols went into place? None, Zix admitted. But surely that proves. It proves that they're working, Maya interrupted gently. The thing about paranoia, Zix, is that it's only paranoia if you're wrong. Her wrist computer vibrated with an alert. A small irregularity in the station's power grid. Probably nothing. But she made a note to check it anyway, because that's what humans did. You know what the real irony is. She continued, making subtle adjustments to the power coupling. The conspirators failed because they weren't